Good evening, everyone. I'm
Good
Harry,
evening.
and that's Sam, and we are back after 2 years for Hanna and Eastwood Get Real. And in light of recent events this week, we thought we'd have a catch-up video and discuss a little bit about what's been going on. Obviously, a massive week for the UK, and I think we've all felt very odd. It's just been a very strange atmosphere this week. Um, but yeah, welcome everyone who is tuning in,
Good
and we'll
evening.
get going. So over to you, Sam.
Um, but before we proceed on to talking about what's happened this week, of course, I did just want to say, we are looking at getting a podcast up and running. Whether it's both of us or just one of us, who knows? Um, but of course, it's been a while. But we decided to pause production on the podcast due to a family emergency for Harry. Harry's dad sadly passed away, um, and I think you've just about recovered from that. I think it's still left a bit of a hole.
Yeah, yeah. It's just bizarre to think that the last one of the last things we did was just after that, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So
And um, of
yeah,
course, I started work, which meant that I didn't have the availability,
yeah,
and that's showing here. I am losing hair on a regular basis now, which is a bit depressing. But I am still somehow alive and kicking, and thankful for that every day. Um, but on to the news. Of course, yeah, you would have heard everywhere. Her Royal Highness the Queen died on Thursday evening at the age of 96. She was on the throne for 70 years, but is now succeeded by King Charles III. And of course, that statement came out on Thursday that she was in under medical supervision,
yeah,
and you almost you don't jump to conclusions, but you almost fear the worst, don't you?
yeah.
Um,
I immediately, and then I immediately thought something's not right for for them to issue this kind of statement, because normally they're usually quite quiet about these things unless it's really quite serious. And then when I heard that some of the other royals were going up to Scotland, I thought this is not good.
yeah, when you heard that the family were being called up to Balmoral, you know that it's not good news.
Yeah,
Um, and I would just like to say for anybody who is watching, whether you are a royalist or not, if you would like to share any tributes or if you would like to share any comments about this event, then feel free to drop it in the comment section wherever you are watching, and we'll try and get to those comments as fast as we can. But I finished work at half past 3, and it took me about an hour to get home because there had been an accident. And
yeah,
I, when I come home, I normally go straight to my piano or I come straight to my computer and mess around for a little bit. But the news was on, and I was just captivated by the news. BBC News were, wasn't covering anything interesting. They were just showing pictures of Balmoral or just showing live coverage of Balmoral. Um, but you're almost captivated by it because she's the Queen. It's a
yeah,
96-year-old lady, and you don't want anything to happen to her. Um, Someone in work on Friday regarded her as immortal,
yeah.
and that they thought she would be around forever.
She's one of those people that, because like she's been a constant throughout most people who are alive now. Like she's been a constant throughout their lives. So
Yeah,
yeah, you just don't can't imagine it without her there. But yeah,
And
it was coming.
yeah, I mean, it's affected people in a lot of different
It
ways.
is. It's very interesting to see, like the impact that it's had on people, and the variety of responses. Um, it is incredible, really.
And whether you're monarchy or anti-monarchy, whether you're black or white, rich or poor, it has brought a nation together. The nation is sort of broken at the moment, especially because of the cost of living crisis, people going through different circumstances. But it's brought the nation together to grieve. And whether you liked the Queen or not, you, as you said, the Queen has always been there. So you're sort of taken back by the news that she isn't going to be there anymore. What are we going to do? We have a new
Yeah.
person in charge.
I found the whole thing very odd, really. How quickly they just started calling the Prince of Wales King Charles all of a sudden. Like
Yeah,
King Charles
it was.
III, and it was. Well, there was like a little period where they suggested that he might not be called King Charles III. Did you see that? Where they, because I think you can decide to change your name if you like,
Yeah,
last minute, which is interesting. But it was just so sudden, and already it was like she's barely gone, and already he's the king.
yeah. I remember BBC News, Hugh Edwards, as we were discussing before coming on air, he had been practicing that for weeks, months, maybe years. We'll never know.
Yeah.
He immediately called
Yeah.
what was Prince Charles, King Charles III, or the King and Queen's consort will remain in Balmoral. And it's like, really? Is it that
It's
quick?
too quick, isn't it? It just doesn't feel right yet. But that's obviously the process, and we've not witnessed a process like this.
No.
Most people haven't. So
I think a lot of this country wouldn't have witnessed anything like this. And I think that's why the majority of the country were getting out over the weekend to proclamation events to witness that and be a part of history. And like me and my mum were talking about it yesterday, and my mum said you may witness 3 monarchs in your generation, because Charles is 74 now.
yeah.
So he may not have very long on the throne. Of course, I hope he lasts a very long time. Please don't murder me for treason. But
Yeah, you're right.
But-
You are right though. Yeah. I mean it's. But then you can I guess William's going to have quite a long time there. And then you think George is the next after that, and he's still a young lad. So it's weird, isn't it? But I thought the other day, we're not going to see in our lifetime, unless we somehow become immortal. I don't know, but we're not going to see another queen in our lifetime.
no.
Be all kings. So
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on something very quickly. Like there have been jokes going around for years, circulating for years, about Charles really wanting to become king, and when the Queen dies, he will be overjoyed, as would Camilla. However, when he did that King's speech to the nation on Friday afternoon, he looked devastated. He looked like he didn't want to be there
no.
in those circumstances.
I mean, imagine having to do that on the day that your mother dies. It's like, wow, that's a hell of a job to do.
Well, you have to give him some respect. His mum died on the Thursday, and he's immediately
Yeah.
announced as the king. He's given no time to grieve at all. He's given an evening, and as you would know, because you lost a parent not very long ago. You need more than an evening to sort of process that and be
Absolutely.
like, okay, I'm going to have to survive without that person now. And he doesn't get that time, and I think that's why he gave the royal family 7 extra days after the 10 days,
Yeah.
so that he can process that. Because I don't think that's healthy at all.
Not at all. Not at all. But did you listen to his speech?
I did.
I
And
thought it was very nicely put.
he addressed it beautifully. And you would have thought that he had been in charge for years. Maybe he had been doing a Hugh Edwards and he had practiced that for years.
I imagine so. I mean,
But it's going to take some getting used to. I still automatically refer to him as Prince Charles.
yeah.
He has always been Prince Charles. I've always sung God Save the Queen. And I remember sitting down with my mum on Friday and watching the service in the evening. And they started singing God Save the King. And I had to say to my mum, are they singing God Save the Queen or God Save the King? Because
Probably a combination of both. Some were singing one, some were singing the other. Because it's so hard to get used to it.
I think the majority of them were just mumbling because they were unsure what to sing.
Like Rowan Atkinson in the church.
Him there with his matchsticks trying to keep his eyes open. But today the Queen did actually leave Balmoral. BBC News apparently showed all 6 hours of the journey from Balmoral to Edinburgh. I didn't watch all 6 hours because
It's a bit much.
it's a bit much. Yeah. So she did leave Balmoral today and made the 6-hour trip to Edinburgh, where she will lie in state at Holyrood House. Tomorrow she will then move on to St Giles Cathedral to lie in state for 24 hours before returning to London. And she'll be taken to Westminster Abbey before, of course, the funeral, and where she'll be lying in state. People are apparently welcome to go and pay their respects, and you just hope that you don't get the few idiots that were around in lockdown and are always lingering that will just go to act like absolute tits. Hopefully there won't be too many disrespectful people.
No, I mean, I think mostly that goes on online because people can hide behind a screen. And some of the stuff on Twitter has been very illuminating, actually.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
interesting that at times like this, that people expose themselves. They don't need to be exposed. They expose themselves by just completely getting the tone wrong and not reading the room at all. And then they put out some comments that really aren't necessary. Like, I'm not saying like you're entitled to your opinion, but it's just a bit. It's very odd to just plaster those sort of things out there when it's a very sensitive moment for a lot of people.
And of course, I mentioned to you, I saw a news report this morning that a fish and chip shop further up the country came under fire and actually had their windows smashed because when the news broke, she wrote out a message on one of her chalkboards that she normally has hanging in the window because, who knows, she's back in the 1940s. And it simply read, "Lizard Liz is dead, Yahoo!" And took out a bottle of champagne, popped the bottle, started shaking it and sprayed it everywhere. And she wondered why the building got egged and her windows got smashed. And she called the police, and the police said, there's been no criminal activity here. Almost as if to say, well, you make your bed, you lie in it. You decided to put that statement out. you've got to deal with the consequences.
Very interesting. And then you've got some of the other tributes that. Did you watch any of those the MPs did in Parliament? Quite interesting. Theresa May, I tell you, I think she's discovered herself as a stand-up comedian. I didn't know it was there. She kept that very quiet. But that was a great speech.
Well, we better watch our backs because she's coming.
She is coming.
Well, with that cheese story, I think she could be a sellout for the Edinburgh Fringe.
Brilliant.
But even Boris Johnson has showed a bit.
Beautiful speech. Whatever
Boris
you think
Johnson.
of him,
Boris Johnson came out with a statement on Thursday and Friday, and his words were just beautiful. And you're thinking, if only you could say something like that when you were in charge of the country, we wouldn't be in this mess. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we're back. But yeah, Gordon Brown has come out and made a statement. David Cameron. You almost forget Gordon Brown was a Prime Minister because it was so long ago.
Yeah, it feels like that, yeah.
Tony Blair has come out and said some kind words. John Major. I mean, she's had 15 Prime Ministers in her time as Queen. And I remember Alex Belfield actually retweeted someone and called them shameful because of the picture of Liz Truss shaking hands with the Queen, and someone had simply tweeted the handshake of death.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, not appropriate.
No, that is, yeah.
And you have to feel sorry for.
Nice for Liz Truss as well to see something like that. You know.
No.
Literally days in, and you're getting stuff like that. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, you have to feel sorry for her because she's having to clear up the mess that Boris Johnson created.
Literally.
And then she gets
not an easy mess to clear up.
And then she gets the news that the Queen's died, and she's now going to have to report to King Charles. And it's like, hold on a minute, can I breathe?
Just let me settle in a few more days, please.
It's like when they say that the world is going at 100 miles an hour. That
really is.
Like, that is when you notice.
Can you? It's like, in 1 week, we had a new Prime Minister and the Queen's death.
Yeah.
And then you've got a war going on. You couldn't make it up.
I mean, apparently, Vladimir Putin did.
He did.
Sent his condolences, and Piers Morgan was very quick to say that's not welcome here. But she was a woman of great love. Like, she welcomed Donald Trump, probably the most hated president. And she walked him around the palace. She had a laugh because apparently she had.
But he really loved the Queen as well. He loved the royal family, and because I think he was interviewed. He did an interview like saying his tribute, and that was very interesting. Yeah, he was a massive fan of the royal family.
But apparently she had
a. Really Biden say very much. He's probably taking a nap at the moment. But I don't know.
He did recycle, let's say, some words that the Queen said on the event of 9/11, which did happen 21 years ago today, which is quite shocking. And she said, "Grief is the price we have to pay for love." Yeah. And he said, "Grief is the price we have to pay for love," on the event of her death. And even President Macron said...
That was a very nice speech.
At the end of his speech, he said, "To Britain, she is your queen. To us, she is the queen."
The Queen, yeah.
And you're thinking, blimey. But tributes have poured in. even football players like Cristiano Ronaldo, who is Portuguese, has said that England has been his home now for 8 years, and he's had nothing but love for the Queen. And he said respects go to the royal family and to the nation at this time. Whereas Harry Maguire, who is a football player that I'm not very fond of, football players were writing massive statements and saying, sharing their experiences, and sports people and journalists and everybody was just sharing stories of meeting the Queen, or just the first time of seeing the Queen on the TV. And Harry Maguire said, "Rest in peace, the Queen. Condolences to the royal family."
I don't know whether you saw, there was like this clip of Nigel Farage, and it was like, I think it was like on, someone sent it to me, I think it was like from TikTok or something, and it was just, the Queen has died, and it was very short and very abrupt, but yeah, interesting. But I think he's a massive fan of the royal family as well, so I saw he laid some flowers down and stuff, and quite a lot of people went actually to the palace and laid down flowers and paid their own tributes, which is amazing. It must have been a weird atmosphere to be there, mustn't it, with everything going on?
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching the news sort of on and off for the last few days, and a woman said today she didn't cry when the news was announced or for the next few days, but as soon as she got to Buckingham Palace, she just couldn't hold it back anymore, just seeing the amount of people that had turned up, and they were all stood there in silence, paying their respects, laying flowers, laying pictures, laying tributes. And there was a clip of either Beatrice or Eugenie, I'll get the two mixed up, and they were walking around looking at the tributes, and she just burst out into tears. And you have to remember, it's not just the Queen that's died, it's a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and you have to have some sort of remorse for the family. Even if you don't like them, you have to have some sort of remorse and think, okay, so someone has just died. There's a place and a time for everything.
And you know, even if you, as we've said, even if you're not a fan of the monarchy, I think you respect her for who she is. She was a remarkable woman, and 96 is a good run. It really is. And I liked her sense of humour more than anything else, because you got snippets of it. And I don't know whether did you watch the programme when David Attenborough met the Queen?
Yes. What? But with the sundial.
That's right. Yeah. And the helicopter goes over the top, and she's like, "That sounds like President Trump or Obama." And then she has to correct it to make sure it's not. To make sure it's nice and balanced.
But the thing is, she is, in recent years, she is most remembered for appearing in the Olympic opening ceremony where she met James Bond and then parachuted out of the helicopter, and then this year at the Platinum Jubilee, obviously meeting Paddington Bear, and having him over for tea. And especially for children who love Paddington or recognise Paddington, they can now make that connection that that's who the Queen is. She's the lady that had the marmalade sandwich in her handbag, saved for a spare occasion.
It's a nice time.
that way she can sort of live on. And as you said, she apparently had a cracking sense of humour. She was apparently very sarcastic, and she loved to crack a joke. And apparently none of the royal family, watching the programme on Friday, none of the royal family knew that she was appearing in the Olympic ceremony.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
They interviewed Edward, and he said about watching the opening ceremony, and he said, we saw James Bond walking into Buckingham Palace, and he said, you immediately think, who have they got to play the Queen?
Yeah, and then she turns around and it is the Queen.
And apparently William did swear quite a lot when he saw his grandmother.
But that showed that, you know, she was good fun, and she would throw herself into things.
She was a good sport, and she didn't shy away from anything. And if she wanted to do something, she would be quite happy to do it.
And there's that the clip of when they met at the G7 and they went to the Eden Project, and she's cutting the cake with a sword, and Kate goes, "There is a knife there." She goes, "I knew there is." Yeah.
But there's another clip that's circulating at the moment at the G7, and they're all sat outside the Eden Project, and she turns around to Boris Johnson and says, "Are we supposed to be looking like we're having a good time?" And he's like, "Yes."
Yeah.
Yes, we are. But of course, we are now into day 3 of 10 of mourning. And the state funeral has been announced for the 19th of September, which is a Monday, and it'll be 11 a.m. It has been declared as a bank holiday, and the Department of Education has announced that schools and colleges will be closed for the day, and I imagine a lot of workplaces, if not all workplaces, will be closed for the day. I think this is such a momentous point in the country's history, especially for these few generations that have never seen a coronation or seen a state funeral. Apparently the last state funeral was Winston Churchill. So we wouldn't have seen a state funeral in our time. And I did make a remark saying, what's the bet Elton John will play Candle in the Wind at the funeral? With his famous words, "Goodbye English Rose." I don't think Crocodile Rock or...
Did you watch Prince Philip's funeral?
Yeah.
I mean, that was an amazing event as well.
And of course, I did pick out a couple of tributes. Going back to Paddington, he did tweet, or someone tweeted on his behalf because he's not real. Sorry, kids.
Sorry, Sam. Sorry to disappoint.
He said, "Thank you, Mom, for everything."
Now we've ruined kids' lives all around the world. Then. Sorry, Paddington is not real.
Well, we won't get started on Santa yet. Don't worry. We'll save that for a Christmas episode.
Happy Christmas.
And then there was the lovely tribute of Philip and the Queen, and it quotes the lovely words that she said during the first lockdown when she addressed the nation, which is, "We will be with our friends again, we will be with our families again, and we will meet again." And of course, I can only imagine that she was heartbroken when Philip died, and of course she lost her best friend almost. And
I think from that moment on, she never seemed the same, and you can imagine it's only it's only natural, really. Um,
And then they're talking about that. There was a lovely picture of Philip and the Queen and one of her corgis, just saying hello again, Lilibet, which of course was his famous nickname, and now the name of one of her great grandchildren, belonging to Princess Pinocchio, as Piers Morgan likes to call her. But yes, I do think it's going to be a long few weeks. It doesn't seem real at all. It still feels very sort of abnormal to me.
There's a strange atmosphere. People don't really know how to react or what. It's just a bizarre atmosphere, and I noticed it immediately on when the announcement came. Like I said to you, just before it happened, I had this weird headache that just came on, just a strange pressure headache.
Yeah,
And it was
yeah.
really strange, and then within a few minutes, the announcement came, and it was like such a seismic moment. It's almost like we all sensed something was going to happen.
And of course, it was a very poignant week or so for the Queen, because it had been 25 years since Princess Diana had died. And regardless of what conspiracy theorists say about how she died or who had an input in her dying, I do think the Queen did feel quite strongly. It was the Queen, it was King Charles' first wife. I think she probably felt quite strongly towards her, and she left quite a lasting legacy on the country, and people still talk about her. We never knew her because we were born too late, unfortunately. But there's that lasting legacy, and I can only hope that the legacy of the Queen goes on as long as Diana's legacy goes on, because
I think so. Absolutely.
what she had done over 70 years, she didn't shy away from any country. No country was too big, no country was too small. Whether it was part of the Commonwealth or not, she was always there, and she was always there with love. She always had a smile on her face.
You're right. You are right.
And it was an infectious sort of smile.
But she came across as a very strong woman as well.
She came across as someone that you wouldn't want to cross.
Oh yeah.
And as I said to you on Thursday when we had our brief conversation, she was the nation's grandmother. Like, she was always there. She always looked out for everybody. And even when she met commoners, almost, she always stood there and had a long conversation. It wasn't like, thank you very much for coming, on to the next person.
Yeah.
It was, thank you very much for coming, what do you do?
Yeah, she would ask a series of questions and try and have a conversation. Yeah, it was nice.
And like, you can only hope that King Charles is like his mother.
Well, I saw a video of him arriving at Buckingham Palace, I think, and he was shaking the hand.
He shook everybody's hand. There's a viral clip at the moment of a woman kissing him, which is
that's quite intense, but
an interesting one. Apparently, she was interviewed and she said, I went up to the king and said, "Can I kiss you?" And he went, "Okay." But that's the sort of thing that will remain a part of history. Like, that was caught on TV.
Yeah.
She will always be able to say, I kissed the king, and people will be like,
it'd be one of those things, you know, like that people put in their profile, like 2 lies or 2 truths and a lie, whatever.
I kissed the king.
Be
Okay,
like,
then.
We'll be like, nah, that's got to be the lie.
You've had too much to drink again, haven't you? Go and sit down. But
it's going to be interesting to see what life is like from now on in this country, because it's going to change quite a bit, I think.
Yeah.
Like the unity that the Queen brought between countries and the respect that she had. I think, Charles is respected, but he is unpopular for some people. And I think it's going to take a while for him to build up the trust that she had, because I think because she was on the throne for so long, she had this respect that I think every monarch will have to earn, really.
Well, she is a huge act to follow. It's like me performing at a concert and having to play After Queen with Freddie Mercury, and it's like, yeah, I'm not going to sound as good, but I'm going to give it a good go. And probably see the whole audience leave during the first chord. But yeah, she's a huge act to follow. And it's going to be interesting, as you said, to see how Charles does, and to see how the country and the Commonwealth cope. Because, of course, there have been lingering rumours that Scotland are going to go back in for an independence vote shortly.
Nicola Sturgeon is rubbing her hands together.
There's circulating rumours that Australia want to come out of the Commonwealth and become a republic. And there are rumours that £5 notes, £10 notes and £20 notes are going to have to get a lot bigger to feature King Charles' ears. Sorry, I had to get that in there somewhere.
Very good.
It's been a very long evening.
We're going to have to invest in some new wallets, I think.
And some new trousers for pockets to be deep enough. But that does end our reunion after 2 years. Our last episode was about the election in America, and we did a very long live stream, and that was joyous. I would quite happily do that again at some point.
It was good fun.
We had a laugh. And life for us is not almost gone at 100 miles an hour. It's gone at a nice steady pace, but we've just been far too busy with life to keep you updated on the news. That's what BBC is for. But of course, as I say, we are looking at coming back in some respect, whether that's weekly, fortnightly, monthly, whether it's one of us, two of us, who knows. But we will see our friends again. We will be with our families again, and of course, we will meet again. And I thought I would leave you, especially because I think my father's watching, and he absolutely adores this bloke. I'm going to leave you with Piers Morgan's tribute to the Queen that was displayed on Thursday night. Thank you very much.
Well, this is one of the saddest and most momentous turning points in the history of the United Kingdom. There's nobody in this country or the world who hasn't lived the majority of their lives under the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. For 70 years she served this country with astoundingly dedicated duty. I struggle to even imagine a Britain without this Queen. But with great sadness, we now have to imagine it, because the moment we've all been dreading has finally come. And tonight everything changes. Her death is an enormous blow, not just to the British people, but to our national psyche. To people around the world who don't fully understand our deep affinity with this Queen, it's as simple as this. Our monarchy and Her Majesty are the very essence of being British. As Abraham Lincoln, apple pie and the Constitution are to being American, so the royal family is to Great Britain. More than an institution, it's an identity, it's who we are. It's the Magna Carta, the Palace of Westminster, the Battle of Waterloo. It's Austen, Dickens, Shakespeare, the Beatles. It's crushing the Nazis. It's Churchill and the Blitz spirit. It's Royal Ascot and the Chelsea Flower Show, cricket at Lord's, Wimbledon tennis, football at Wembley. Nothing and nobody has symbolised what it means to be British better than Queen Elizabeth. She's always been there. She had an aura of invincibility that sadly today has been shattered. And now we have to learn as a country to live without her. Whatever your views of the royal family, wherever you live in the world, you will remember this day because it's history unfolding before our eyes. This remarkable little lady was not just our longest serving monarch, she was the second longest reigning monarch in all of history. She appointed 15 British prime ministers. She hosted 13 of the last 14 American presidents. She was our queen for 30% of America's entire history. Think about that. She held more than 100 state visits for the world's leaders. She was the head of state herself in 17 countries. She was the head of the Commonwealth of Nations. And she guided us all through the best of times and the worst of times, through wars, terrorism, pandemics, natural disasters, financial crises. Whatever it was, she was there with dignity, duty, stoicism, and that famous stiff upper lip. Her last act this week was to appoint our new Prime Minister. Remarkably, staggeringly, she was dutiful until the very, very end. I'm so very glad and so very grateful that we all have had the chance to say thank you at her Platinum Jubilee celebrations this summer. And she was able to see just how much she meant to us. Elizabeth II demonstrated the very best of our British values in her leadership. She represented those values to the world. She was our greatest export, our greatest leader, the greatest of Britons. When Her Majesty the Queen died this afternoon in Balmoral, a little piece of all of us here in Britain died with her.